This morning's second reading comes from the book of James, and in it we hear this little phrase, be doers of the word. Be doers of the word. Now, the book of James as a whole has a long and storied history within Christianity. Martin Luther, for one, could not stand the book of James. He thought the book of James was filled with what he called works righteousness. And for Luther, he was concerned that James was overemphasizing a person's ability to earn their way into heaven. For Luther, and for many other Christian theologians, we don't earn our way into heaven. Heaven is a gift from God given to us that God calls us into, out of God's own goodness, not out of our own goodness. And so for Luther, the book of James emphasized works way too much, because Luther read the book of James as though it was talking about how to get to heaven. But now Luther would be very happy this morning that we're baptizing little Claire back here. So welcome to Claire's family and friends. Luther would love that we're baptizing Claire because Claire is only 6 months old. And for Luther, that represents that God is really the one who's doing the action in the baptism. It's not Claire kind of bringing herself to the baptism. We're bringing her to the baptism on behalf of the community and in trust of God and God's love. So that's kind of where Luther is on getting into heaven. We're not going to actually talk a lot about getting into heaven this morning, though, because we're going to talk about being doers of the word. And to talk about that, we're going to emphasize more the gifts that we're given, the way that we use those gifts that God gives us here and now, not as a way to get into heaven, but as a way to be in relationship with God, as a way to practice human agency in the midst of God's own action. So this question, the question we're going to look at, is the question about who is doing the acting. Is it God or is it us? Who has to do the work, God or us? And we're not talking about salvation. We're talking about living as Christians in the world. To talk about this, talk about doers of the word, I want to talk about water skiing. How many of you have ever been water skiing? I was told to ask this question at 8 o'clock because I was told to shorten this part of the sermon if not a lot of people have ever been water skiing. Good, okay, so a couple of you. If you haven't been water skiing, it's okay. I don't know if I can recommend it full-heartedly, but I got to go water skiing last week. I was up in the Adirondacks, which is in upstate New York. I was doing a wedding for a family friend, and I had done the wedding for the oldest child 5 years ago, and this was the middle child, and then there's another one that I said, we'll get you all married soon enough. So the Adirondacks is this beautiful area way, way, way north. It's almost like an hour away from Canada, and it's wooded, and there are lakes everywhere, and we were on a lake. And the day before the wedding, we got to go water skiing. Now, my history with water skiing is that I used to teach water skiing and drive the speedboat at a summer camp when I was in college. Now, I don't know how wise this camp was to go and give a 20-year-old a 300 horsepower speedboat and say, hey, take these 10-year-olds and teach them how to, fly behind a speedboat. But they did, and everyone survived, so that's good. But I used to love coaching or teaching how to water ski. I actually like teaching how to water ski more than I like to water ski myself. And that's probably because I'm just a little bit afraid to do anything crazy on the skis. I like to kind of get up and just sit behind the boat. I don't like to do tricks. I don't like to slalom. I don't like to go over jumps. But I would love to teach these little campers how to water ski. And one of the things that I told them when they were first beginning was that as they sat in the water, they put their skis on, they had their life jacket on, and the boat would come around and it would give you the line, and the line would kind of go out slowly, and as the line would go out, you would need to do two things. You would need to bend your knees and keep your arms straight, okay? That's how you can get up. That's the hard part, is getting up on the water. So you got to keep your knees bent and your arms straight, because once the boat kind of pulls that tension and you start to move in the water, especially when you say hit it and the boat revs up and it starts to take off, the instinct is to actually kind of do it on your own. You try to stand up. So what you do in the water is you're getting dragged through the water, and your instinct is to just go up and to kind of pull yourself up as though you're doing a pull-up, right? But the problem with that is that if you pull yourself up, you actually pull slack into the line, which then the boat keeps going much faster than you're going to go. And then it pulls the slack out of the line very quickly, and you get pulled face forward and do a belly flop onto the water. So when you water ski, you cannot do more work than the boat. You have to let the boat do the work. If you heard that line, let the boat do the work. Well, that's exactly right. You have to kind of trust that the boat's going to do it, keep your arms straight and your knees bent, and then you are able to get up on the water. But that doesn't mean let the boat do the work. The problem I have with that line is that it makes it sound like you do no work. It makes it sound like you can just sit there in the water like a limp noodle, and then all of a sudden you're going to be able to water ski brilliantly. You have to actually tense your legs, and you have to kind of hold your arms, and it's a little bit of a workout. You know, you've got to let the boat do the work while you do the work as well. And in this way, I think we can, draw a little bit of a parallel to God. And we're not going to draw it too heavily, but God's kind of the boat, we're kind of the water skiers. And what that looks like for us is that God is doing the heavy lifting. God is the one that's powering the whole thing. God is the one who's giving the gifts, and we are the ones who are being a conduit for those gifts. We're responding. We still have to work, but we're not the one who have to kind of generate the energy to do that. That's God's job. And in terms of our own gifting set, you can see this in your own life when you think about, kind of how you are the way you are. Did you get to where you are on your own completely? Are you, maybe you are. We talk a lot about kind of a self-made person or a self-made man, and we talk a lot about, meritocracy, that you kind of get what you earn. But in my own life, I can point to numerous teachers and mentors and priests and family members who have helped me, who have supported me, who have loved me in kind of working together to become the person I am. It's not been my own journey completely. It's been a journey that's been interlaced with others in order to become who I am. And I think that's exactly what James is talking about. James is talking about working alongside of, kind of working behind God almost, as though you're water skiing behind that boat. Working behind God as God pulls you through this life. Not face down, belly flopping into the water, but rather working with God so that you too can produce good. And that's what I think he means at the beginning. This is where I think Luther, I really like Luther a lot, but I think this is where he was reading it so focused on going to heaven that he missed the beginning part. He said in James, every good and generous gift, or every good and generous act is a gift that comes from above. And that line, I think, sets up the rest. When James says, be doers of the word, he's saying, go and take those gifts that God has given you and be a conduit. Kind of use those gifts as God has given them to you for the good of the people. At the end, he says, practice true religion. And what is true religion? True religion is to love and support the orphans and the widows. And it's that kind of work. That's the work that God has given us to do. And he's given us the power and the energy to do that as we are doers of the word. And so may you and I be kind of blessed as we, get up on those skis and kind of, work with God, work alongside of God in this life. Not out of fear of what's coming next. That's all guaranteed. Going to heaven that's in the bank. We don't have to worry about that. What we have to worry about now, or not even worry, what we can focus on now is how we can use God's gift to the glory of God and in love and service of one another. Be doers of the word. Amen.